The moon hung low over the dense canopy of the forest, its pale silver light barely penetrating the thick foliage. Beneath the rustling leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl, a small group gathered in the shadowed clearing, their faces intermittently illuminated by the flickering flames of a hastily built fire. Gaius Valerius sat rigidly among them, his youthful figure tense, eyes sharp and restless. Across from him, the barbarian chieftains exchanged cautious glances, their scarred faces hardened by years of conflict and survival. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, mingling with the faint bitterness of smoke. "We offer you strength," one of the chieftains said in halting Latin, his voice rough and deliberate. "Together we can shift the tide. The old Rome weakens. Your family, your legacy, preserve it by embracing the new order." Gaius met the gaze steadily, though his heart pounded with a cocktail of fear and determination. "I do not seek Rome's ruin," he replied, voice low but firm, "only to ensure our survival when the Senate turns its back on the truth." A murmur rippled through the group. Julia, standing just behind Gaius, whispered encouragement, her eyes alight with conviction. "This is our chance," she said. "You are the bridge between two worlds." Meanwhile, far from the forest's quiet conspiracies, Marcus Valerius sat alone in the dim study of the family estate. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the walls lined with heavy tomes and scrolls. In his hands, he held intercepted letters-coded messages whose meaning gnawed at his heart. The words hinted at secret meetings, alliances forged in darkness, alliances that threatened everything he had sworn to protect. His jaw tightened as he reread a passage. "Guy," he murmured, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. The senator's mind waged a silent battle, his unyielding loyalty to Rome and his family's honor clashing with the painful possibility of his son's betrayal. That evening, the Valerius family convened in the ancestral dining hall. The air was heavy with unspoken tensions, the flickering torches casting a restless dance of light and shadow across the marble floor. Gaius sat opposite his father, his youthful face alight with quiet defiance, while Livia watched silently, her sharp eyes weighing every word, every glance. "Father," Gaius began, voice steady though edged with frustration, "we cannot cling to a dying empire and expect to survive. The barbarians grow stronger. The Senate is paralyzed. We must adapt or perish." Marcus met his son's gaze, the weight of years and expectation pressing down on his broad shoulders. "Adaptation must not come at the cost of our honor, Gaius. Rome's legacy is not so easily discarded." Lucilla, their sister and sister-in-law, respectively, intervened gently. "Perhaps there is a path that honors both survival and tradition, but we must tread carefully lest we lose ourselves in the shadows." The conversation fractured into uneasy silence. Each member wrestled with their own fears and hopes, the family's unity trembling on the edge of irrevocable change. Days later, in the cool dawn air of the estate's courtyard, Tiberius approached Marcus. The veteran soldier's eyes were grave beneath his weathered brow, the morning chill sharpening his features. "Senator Tiberius," began, "the barbarians grow restless, emboldened by unknown alliances. I fear Gaius's actions may hasten the storm we seek to avoid." Marcus exhaled slowly, the weight of leadership settling heavily upon him. "And yet, we face a choice: guard our fading traditions or embrace uncertain alliances. I fear the fracture has already begun." The city beyond the estate's walls stirred awake, its streets echoing with the distant clangor of arms and the whispered promises of change. Marcus's thoughts swirled, torn between the steadfast past and the uncertain future his son was forging in the shadows. The chapter closes as Marcus stands at a balcony overlooking the cityscape, the first light of dawn casting a somber glow. His resolve steels even as doubt gnaws, the question lingering: how far can loyalty bend before it breaks? The dense forest, the flicker of firelight on worn faces, and the clash of ideals between father and son weave a tapestry of tension and hope. Marcus's internal struggle mirrors the empire's decline, and Gaius's bold gambit threatens to redefine their legacy. The fractured loyalty at the heart of the Valerius family sets the stage for decisions that will shape not only their fate but that of Rome itself. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the marble floor of the Valerius atrium, where Livia Valeria sat surrounded by a small circle of trusted allies. The air was thick with the scent of oil lamps and the faint musk of old stone. Her sharp dark eyes, usually so composed and austere, glimmered with a fierce, calculating light as she spoke in hushed tones. "We cannot afford to wait for fate to decide Marcus's future," she said quietly, fingers resting lightly on a folded scroll that contained lists of senators and their known allegiances. "Cassius grows bolder each day, but there are fractures in his coalition. We will exploit them." Her voice was steady, though beneath it lay the unmistakable undercurrent of ruthlessness. Around her, the noble women and senators' wives nodded in agreement, their faces taut with anxiety and resolve. The Valerius family's survival depended on these subtle, often unseen maneuvers, the delicate art of persuasion and intimidation practiced behind closed doors. Livia had long understood that the Senate was not a place for open confrontation, but a theatre of shadows where whispers held more power than swords. Across the city, Marcus Valerius paced the length of his study in the family villa, the weight of his silvering hair and the sharp lines of his face etched by exhaustion. Though he had returned to Rome with hope and determination, the city's decay pressed on him like a physical burden. He had witnessed the Senate's growing factionalism firsthand, and the ruthless ambition of Cassius Drusus was a threat unlike any before. Yet tonight, as Livia's message arrived, a brief note assuring him that her interventions had delayed Cassius's immediate plans, a flicker of reluctant hope stirred in his chest. Seated nearby was Lucilla, his younger sister, her delicate features drawn with concern. She had listened to Livia's report with quiet apprehension, her calm demeanor belying the storm of emotion beneath. Later, in the family's garden, soft twilight bathed the marble statues and carefully tended herbs in a muted glow. Lucilla confronted Livia, her voice trembling with sorrow and accusation. "Must we sacrifice all our principles to survive?" she asked, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Where is the honor in alliances forged through deceit and manipulation?" Livia's expression hardened, the faintest shadow crossing her austere beauty. "Honor is a luxury Rome can no longer afford," she replied gently but firmly. "If we do not adapt, we perish. I do this for Marcus, for our family." The rift between them was palpable, a fracture that mirrored the very empire they sought to save. The garden, once a place of solace, now seemed a battleground of ideals and survival. Meanwhile, in the Senate chambers, the grand hall echoed with whispers and furtive glances. Senators gathered in small clusters, their voices low, the air thick with suspicion and ambition. From the shadows, Cassius Drusus observed with cold eyes that bore the scars of his brutal past. A cruel smile curved his lips as he sensed the fragile balance was tipping, that the Valerius family's newfound shield was but a temporary reprieve. The game was far from over. Yet beneath the political machinations, the Valerius household grappled with its own internal conflicts. Marcus found himself caught between the steadfast loyalty to Rome's tradition and the pragmatic ruthlessness his wife embodied. Lucilla's moral anguish echoed the dying virtues of old Rome, while Livia's strategic manipulations represented the harsh necessities of a crumbling world. The price of pragmatism was exacting, and each choice carved deeper into the family's soul. As night deepened over Rome, the flickering candlelight in the Valerius villa seemed to burn a little lower, shadows lengthening across the walls like the empire's own decay. The family's survival depended on delicate balances between hope and fear, loyalty and betrayal, honor and survival. And as the city held its breath, the question remained: how far would they go before their legacy was lost in the ashes of empire? The chapter closes as Livia returns to her chamber, her expression unreadable, the weight of her decisions pressing heavily upon her. Outside, the distant sounds of Rome's restless night, the murmur of voices, the clang of armor, the faint howl of wind through broken streets, underscore the tense uncertainty that holds the city in its grip. The fragile peace, won through pragmatism, is but a pause before the storm, and all await the next move in this deadly game. The flickering light of the oil lamps cast long shadows across the walls of the Valerius family shrine. The once vibrant frescoes, now dulled by age and neglect, their colors faded to ghostly whispers of the past. Lucilla stood before them, her fingers trembling as they traced the outlines of Jupiter's regal figure. His gaze, once commanding, now lost 2 times in different hand. The scent of extinguished incense hung heavy in the air, mingling with the damp chill of the marble floor beneath her sandal-clad feet. Her breath caught in her throat as she knelt before the altar, lips moving in silent supplication. "Divine ancestors," she whispered, "where have you gone? Have you abandoned us in this hour of darkness?" The silence answered her with icy finality. No rustle of robes, no flicker of light, no divine voice to comfort or chastise. Only the cold stone and the fading echoes of an empire's prayers. Lucilla's heart ached with a loneliness deeper than the physical solitude of the shrine. Rome, once the favored daughter of the gods, now seemed forsaken. The omens, the portent omens, read by priests whose voices wavered with uncertainty, spoke of wrath and withdrawal, of gods turning their faces away as the empire crumbled beneath its own weight. Outside, the city's restless noises crept faintly through the villa's thick walls. The distant clang of iron on stone, the murmur of voices rising in suspicion and fear, the occasional sharp cry of a sentinel warning against unknown threats. The world beyond was unraveling, and in the quiet sanctuary of her faith, Lucilla felt it most keenly. Later, in the villa's courtyard, Marcus Valerius and Livia Valeria met beneath a sky thick with heavy clouds that threatened rain but withheld it, as though even the heavens hesitated to weep for Rome. Marcus's tall frame was silhouetted against the pale stone, his silvering hair catching the dim light as he spoke with measured calm. "The god's silence is not abandonment," he said, voice low but resolute. "Rome endures because of men's will, not divine favor. We must hold to our duty regardless." His eyes, sharp and searching, met Livia's steady gaze. Livia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Duty will not protect us from the barbarians at the gates, Marcus. Nor will prayers fill empty coffers or silence the knives in the Senate. The gods may be silent because they see the truth we refuse to face. Survival demands pragmatism, not piety." Their words hung between them, a fragile bridge over widening chasms of belief and despair. Marcus's stoicism clashed with Livia's cynicism, a reflection of the larger turmoil tearing at Rome's very soul. That evening, as twilight bled into night, Lucilla found herself drawn to the ruins of an ancient temple beyond the city's edge. The crumbling columns, worn by centuries of wind and neglect, stood like silent sentinels in the fading light. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of wild herbs and earth. She knelt among the broken stones, hands folded, eyes closed. "Show me a sign," she begged the emptiness, voice trembling with a mixture of hope and despair. The wind stirred, whispering through the ruins, but brought no answer. The gods remained distant, their presence a fading memory etched in stone and shadow. Returning home, Lucilla joined the family for dinner, the heavy air thick with unspoken fears. She offered a prayer for guidance and Mercy a plea for strength to face the coming storms. Livia's eyes narrowed, skepticism gleaming beneath her composed exterior. Marcus said nothing, his silence a fortress against the tide of uncertainty. The clash of faith and pragmatism played out subtly in glances and half-spoken words. Lucilla's earnestness met Livia's guarded dismissal, and Marcus balanced between them, torn between loyalty to tradition and the harsh realities they faced. As the meal ended, Lucilla's voice broke the uneasy quiet. "If the gods have truly turned away, what hope remains for us?" Livia's reply was soft but firm. "Hope is not found in ancient rites or faded frescoes. It is forged in the choices we make now." Marcus raised his glass, eyes steady in the flickering lamplight. "Then let us choose wisely, for Rome's fate and ours rests in our hands." Outside, the night deepened, and the city's shadows stretched long and uncertain. The echoes of the gods had grown faint, but the struggle for the empire's soul was far from over. In the silence that followed, each member of the Valerius family wrestled with their own fears, hopes, and loyalties, caught between a fading past and an uncertain future. The night whispered promises of change, and with it the fragile hope that even in decay, resilience might yet endure. The Senate chamber was thick with a charged silence, the kind that precedes a storm. Flickering torchlight cast long shadows on the marble pillars, lending the vast hall a spectral quality. Senators gathered, their faces a mixture of suspicion, fear, and hidden calculation. Cassius Drusus stood at the center, his scarred visage illuminated with a cold, ruthless light. His voice, low but commanding, cut through the murmurs like a drawn blade. "Fellow senators," Cassius began, "the time has come to cleanse the Senate of those who would see Rome fall by clinging to outdated ideals. The empire demands strength and new blood. Tradition cannot be a chain that binds us to decay." A murmur of assent rose from a contingent of younger senators and those aligned with Cassius's vision. Yet from the opposite side of the chamber, a ripple of unease spread. Marcus Valerius stood among the traditionalists, his tall frame rigid, silvering dark hair catching the torchlight. His sharp eyes scanned the room, noting the shifting allegiances. The names Cassius read aloud were a death knell for many. Senators whose loyalty to Rome's old ways marked them for political exile or worse. Marcus's voice, when he spoke, was steady but carried the weight of desperation. Rome is not a mere tool for power, nor a stage for ambition unchecked. It is a civilization built on honor, duty, and the wisdom of our ancestors. To cast aside these pillars is to invite ruin. I urge you all to consider the cost of this recklessness. His words were met with silence, then a few scattered nods, but the momentum Cassius had built was formidable. The purge was swift and merciless. Trusted allies of Marcus were arrested under charges of treason and conspiracy, their fates sealed before the Senate's eyes. Marcus himself narrowly escaped capture, aided by a network of loyalists and the discreet intervention of his wife. Livia, ever the strategist, moved through the corridors with quiet purpose. Her sharp dark eyes missed nothing, and her austere beauty belied a fierce resolve. When a messenger approached with news of the arrests, she intercepted him with a calm yet commanding tone. "Ensure the family is warned. No word of this must reach the barbarians or our enemies outside these walls." The weight of the purge pressed heavily on the Valerius household. Lucilla, Marcus's delicate and gentle-featured sister, found no solace in their ancestral home. Instead, she sought refuge in the ruins of a forgotten temple, her palms pressed against cold stone as she whispered prayers for mercy. Tears brimmed in her eyes as the spiritual decay mirrored the political collapse she witnessed. Inside the Senate, Cassius's grip tightened. His loyal senators moved with newfound boldness, reshaping alliances and silencing dissent. The chamber that once echoed with reason and debate now buzzed with fear and opportunism. Marcus, forced into the shadows, contemplated his next moves. His rigid adherence to tradition had brought him to the brink of ruin, yet his resolve to preserve Rome's legacy remained unbroken. The purge was not merely a political maneuver. It was a declaration that the old Rome was dying, and a new, harsher order was rising from its ashes. Marcus's survival was uncertain, his allies few, and the path ahead fraught with peril. Yet, in the depths of betrayal and loss, a reluctant hope flickered, a hope that resilience and honor might yet endure amid the empire's turmoil. As the torches dimmed and the chamber emptied, the echoes of the purge lingered like a ghost. The Senate was no longer a place of unity, but a battlefield where power was won through ruthlessness. Marcus's journey had taken a perilous turn. The question was no longer whether he could save Rome, but whether Rome could survive him. The night outside was heavy with the scent of smoke and decay. Somewhere in the distance, the clash of armor and the distant cries of barbarians reminded all that the empire's twilight was far from over. Marcus Valerius, once a proud guardian of Rome's traditions, now faced the harsh reality that survival might demand sacrifice beyond his imagining. And yet, as dawn approached, casting a pale light over the broken city, a fragile resolve hardened within him. The Senate in turmoil was but a symptom of a greater crisis. The Valerius family, fractured and threatened, must navigate this tempest or be swept away forever. The ashes of empire lay scattered, but from them, perhaps, a new dawn could rise. The Valerius household was a battleground of ideals and desperation as evening fell over Rome's weary skyline. The marble pillars of their ancestral home, once symbols of unyielding strength, now seemed to bear the weight of a world in decline, their surfaces cracked and dulled by time and neglect. In the great atrium, where the family had long gathered to discuss matters of state and kin, voices rose in heated discord. Marcus Valerius, tall and dignified despite the weariness etched into his sharp eyes and silvering hair, stood facing his son, Gaius. The younger man's youthful energy was a stark contrast to his father's measured solemnity. His gaze burned with restless intensity, his athletic frame taut with the urgency of his convictions. "Father," Gaius began, voice firm yet edged with frustration, "we cannot cling to the past while Rome burns around us. The old ways have failed. If we do not act boldly, our family and all we have stood for will be lost to the ashes." Marcus's reply was calm but resolute. "And what would you have us do, son? Betray the very principles that built this empire? Surrender to chaos and treachery?" There is honor in endurance as well as in action. The tension between them was a mirror of the Empire's own fractures between tradition and change, loyalty and survival. Nearby, Livia Valeria observed the exchange with a composed but guarded expression. Her sharp dark eyes, framed by an austere beauty, betrayed the storm of thoughts beneath her calm exterior. She had long understood that survival in Rome's treacherous political climate demanded more than idealism, required cunning and pragmatism. Later that evening, Livia withdrew to the family's secluded garden, a rare sanctuary where the fading light of dusk softened the harshness of the world. The air was heavy with the scent of wilting roses and damp earth, mingling with the distant clang of metal and muted voices from the city beyond the garden walls. She sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped behind the crumbling skyline of Rome. In her mind, she rehearsed the delicate maneuvers needed to navigate the shifting allegiances within the Senate and among the rising barbarian powers. Every decision was a gamble, every alliance fraught with peril. Yet, beneath her calm exterior lay a fierce determination to shield her family from the encroaching storm, even if it meant embracing the very ruthlessness she once despised. Within the family library, a sanctuary lined with scrolls and faded frescoes, Lucilla Valeria's gentle voice broke the heavy silence. The younger sister of Marcus, delicate in frame and demeanor, clasped her hands tightly as she spoke, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Marcus," she implored softly, "we cannot lose ourselves to bitterness and revenge. The gods have not abandoned us entirely. There is still a path of mercy and honor, even now. Our family's dignity depends on it." Marcus met her gaze, the conflict within him palpable. "Lucilla," he replied, his voice tinged with sorrow, "I yearned for that path. But the world we knew is fading, and I fear we must walk through darkness to find any light." As these private struggles unfolded, Gaius convened a secret meeting in a shadowed chamber beneath the city. The flicker of candlelight cast long, uncertain shadows over the faces of trusted allies gathered around a heavy wooden table. Gaius's voice was low but fervent as he outlined a bold plan to secure their family's future through alliances with the very forces Rome had long scorned. "Our enemies grow stronger," he warned, "and the old guard weakens. We must embrace change, form new bonds beyond the Senate's walls, or be swept aside by fate." The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with the scent of beeswax and the faint smoke of incense. Each man and woman weighed the risks, the promise of survival against the peril of betrayal. Back in the Valerius household, the fractures within the family deepened. Livia's attempts to mediate between Marcus's hope for reconciliation and Gaius's radicalism were fraught with difficulty. She understood that the bonds holding them together were tested not only by external enemies, but by the divergent visions of survival they each clung to. In the quiet moments before dawn, Marcus stood alone on the balcony overlooking the city. The cold night air whispered of an empire's twilight, and the distant sounds of restless streets echoed the turmoil in his heart. He pondered the cost of loyalty and the price of adaptation, aware that the choices made in the coming days would define not only his family's fate, but the legacy of Rome itself. The chapter closes on the uneasy silence of a city and a family on the brink, the fragile hope of survival shadowed by the ever-present spectre of loss and betrayal. The question lingers in the air. Can the Valerius family reconcile their fractured bonds before the ashes of their world are finally scattered to the winds?